Okay. Well, thank you all for attending today. This is the EIOF lighting and composting webinar put on by the EIOF Boulder County Steering Committee, and we're also inviting the City of Boulder EIOF participants as well. And just start off with a little bit of housekeeping here. If you want to have your video on, that's optional. If you're presenting, preference is to have your video on. Just a reminder to mute yourself unless you are presenting. And then if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, or you can also raise your hand, and hopefully I'll see those pop up as well. And just a reminder that we will be recording this meeting. As I mentioned, there are some cultivators that were interested in viewing this offline as they couldn't attend today. My role, I'm with the Partners for Clean Environment program, and then I'm also the EIOF Sustainability Coordinator for Boulder County. We also have Denise Grimm, who works with City of Boulder cannabis cultivators, and she's not able to attend today, but just wanted to let you know how her role impacts this position as well. So with that, I'll just go ahead and we can turn it over to Ash.
Unmute yourself, Ash.
Well, yeah, the mute button. Now that is a common phenomenon. Good morning. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. In the interest of time, I'm not going to share a PowerPoint. I just decided that I'm just going to talk instead of doing PowerPoint. Maybe that's a good thing, or maybe it's a bad thing. We'll see. A little bit about me and what I'm going to do today is my name is Ash Ganley. I'm the CEO of Rebate Technologies, which is kind of a PhD-driven, very scientifically vital LED cannabis-specific technology company that does more than just LED lighting, but that's our primary focus. That company began as a joint venture between our co-founders and research partners at the University of Georgia, who were studying their PhD thesis under photobiologist Dr. Mark Van Ursel, and later became a direct cultivator partnership with my other company, which is called Nobo Incorporated, which is a very small, I hesitate to use the term, but technically it's true. It's a very small boutique MSO with vertically integrated operations in Colorado, Michigan, and soon to be, all fingers crossed, depending on how the wind blows in the Windy City, Illinois as well. So the perspective I bring is hopefully valuable in terms of understanding the LED space, both from the point of view of being a technologist and evangelist for LED and cannabis specifically, and also being a licensed many-year history cultivator using LED as well. So a little bit about LED in general for cannabis. I think it's the most important thing to understand is that LED has gone through a lot of changes, not just in the technology, efficiency, and attributes that affect photomorphogenesis in cannabis, but also, even more importantly, in my opinion, in how LED is being used, the SOPs that surround a successful LED cannabis grow. And I'm going to touch on those in a little bit, but first I just want to catch everybody up to speed on LED technology, basically on a timeline, where LED tech was 3 and 5 years ago versus where we are today and how that compares to legacy lighting like HPS and ceramic metal halide and other HID emittents. So the short story is that when LED first came out, it was not a very efficient technology. There wasn't a lot of science behind it, and there certainly weren't partnerships between actual cannabis cultivators and the LED technology, mostly coming out of Southeast Asia. And so that led to some bottlenecks in both the understanding of and development of LED tech. So a lot of growers that used LED early on had bad results for reasons that are pretty easy to understand if you peel back the onion layers and take a look at what caused LED technology to have less than stellar performance outcomes early on in the process of adopting it. And to understand that, it's 3 main things. One is it did not have the correct spectrum. Early LEDs were very heavy in blue and red without understanding that it's not just the presence of these colors of the spectrum, it's the ratios between them. And only recently has photobiology research led to the conclusions that other aspects of the spectrum are just as important as green and red, which obviously create the most direct response in all plants, cannabis included. So the spectrum was poorly understood with LED to begin with. Number two, a lot of the fixtures did not uniformly distribute the light. A lot of fixtures were box-shaped, or technically high bays, in an aluminum shell that had computer fans on each side of the aluminum shell, passing air over the high wattage componentry inside, which is a huge no-no. Anytime you have high wattage componentry being cooled by computer fans in an aluminum shell in a high heat environment, you get a lot of product failure. So a couple of things happened early on that really soured people to LED tech. Spectrum, intensity, uniformity of distribution, and thermal management. Over the years, these problems have been iteratively solved by a variety of companies, a few in particular who have done a good job of it. So now today, why can you say, I'm adopting LED technology and I expect to outperform high pressure sodium or ceramic metal halide lamps in terms of just raw output, meaning dry weight yield, but also chemoprofiling, expression of terpenes, subcannabinoids across the board? It can be done now. Whereas 3 or 4 years ago, one often had to make a choice between being efficient and being extremely profitable. That is no longer the choice. It's not a binary decision. Now, if you know how to grow with LED properly, you can use LED technology, take all the benefits that you get from rebates, all the benefits you get from lowering your kW footprint, from not having to replace lamps that have mercury in them, et cetera, but you don't have to sacrifice yield and your chemoprofiling and all the value propositions that come from the plant itself. So the reasons for that are numerous, but quite simply, it has to do with the fact that the technology has improved. Multi-bar fixtures uniformly distribute light. The spectrum has come a long way. For example, we at GrowRay realize that the spectrum has to be tailored in a way where you have a full spectrum light, but you have distinct, scientifically proven ratios between the peaks of the high value areas in the spectrum, especially between red and far red. It's not just having red and far red in the spectrum, it's the distinct ratio, the presence of each in relation to the other that creates specific photomorphogenic responses that give you a competitive edge in terms of lowering your OPEX and getting better production. So looking at LED tech, if you're curious about companies, a good way to vet them out is to understand, number one, you want to find a company that has scientific bona fides, that the team actually understands science, that there have been scientists and cultivators on the staff, and potentially, for us anyway, the most important thing is that the company is actually tied into an R&D component with an actual cultivator, so that the research and data that comes out of the company is actually tied to P&L and actual results in the field. So if you can find that, an LED company that does that, then the credibility aspect, the risk is a little bit taken off the table. Number two is thermal management. Many companies today are just rebranding Southeast Asian knockoff products. There are a whole host of factories in Shenzhen, China, that have relationships with US companies where all they do is stick their name on it, claim it's their own product, and go out to market with it. 99% of these companies are sacrificing quality because it's a commodity drive now, and the price is lower, but the quality is much lower. So the thermal management is poor. So you get LEDs that are runaway heat problematic, meaning that if you don't have good thermal management, you're going to have a much lower lifespan of the product. The luminous output, meaning the amount of light that comes out of the fixture over time, is going to go down, 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 down because you have different heat pockets. The drivers are not connected to the LED chips themselves in an effective way that takes into account the thermal aspect. So always ask and look for robust thermal management. For example, we at GrowRay have chosen to mount our circuit boards on a graphite substrate because it's the most efficient way to conduct heat off of the LEDs themselves and put them into a heat sink to dissipate in the atmosphere where you want the heat to actually go. So the second piece of thermal management is make sure that you have to use a multi-bar solution for LED. Otherwise, you do not get uniform distribution of light. Multi-bar meaning a series of bars mounted across a chassis, so you have an even, uniform cone of light on the canopy surface intended for each fixture. If you have a box-shaped like a California Lightworks LED, or rest in peace Lumigro, they're no longer with us, or Helio Spectra, those companies compress all their diodes into a narrow box, and it creates a flashlight effect where directly underneath the light you get plenty of light, but on the edges of your canopy you don't get much light, not enough to actually contribute economically to what you're trying to accomplish. So those are a big no-no, but as long as you go with a multi-bar solution, make sure that the heat sinks themselves have enough aluminum on them to dissipate heat as well, and make sure that the engineering is thermally robust. It's the most important thing. And then finally, spectrum. Make sure that the spectrum isn't just a full white spectrum. Make sure that the LED company you choose is taking advantage of the fact you can tailor your spectrum to get specific results. So you want a distinct ratio between blue, red, far red. Those three are important. You want between 8 and 13% far red versus your regular red. That's number one. That teaches a plant that it has to perform and express, not stretch. Any more or less in that far red gives stretching. So a lot of companies just arbitrarily insert a value of far red into their spectrum and claim, hey, we have far red. Doesn't matter if it's outside of the 8 to 13% ratio to regular red, because then you get stretching and it's problematic. So make sure that the company knows science, knows cultivation, knows cannabis, and are robustly thermally engineered and have a good warranty. We have a 7-year warranty because we have all those thermal components that we know will cause the life of the light to usually exceed the life of the company that we're selling to. So that's very important. In terms of vetting it out from a third party like DLC, this is also very important. DLC obviously is a third-party agency that performs a vetting function so that companies that roll out with claims in terms of their efficiencies can't BS. So DLC looks at what your claims are in terms of your efficiencies, meaning wattage in, wattage processed, light out. DLC will look at what you really have and will be able to say yes or no, this company is for real and what their claims are correct, versus companies that make false claims and cannot get DLC listed because their spec sheet is making claims that can't be backed up when it's put through the paces, when the fixture is put through the paces with a third-party agency like Design Lights Consortium, DLC. So being DLC listed is very important. DLC is a company that obviously it encompasses a lot of different lighting. It's not just horticulture. That's their newest kind of wing of their company. And so as DLC evolves, we evolve with them. And obviously we are a DLC listed company, and you have to be able to use that as a vetting agency to understand if the light you're buying delivers what it promises on. Avoiding LED problems comes down to SOPs. Understand that you're asking the plant to do more with more light. So you're really coaxing the biggest expression of the genetic capability in your plant when you add more light. The correct LED light will give uniform, high intensity light in the correct spectrum to your entire canopy. And if you've grown with HPS in the past, you're probably not used to having that much intensity of light in the correct spectrum that really is giving the plant tons of input. And unless you account for that input in other areas of your SOPs, the plant will see it as stress, and you may think LEDs are causing a problem for your grow when in fact you're just not harnessing that increased energy effectively. So you have to look at CO2, you have to look at defoliation, you have to look at lights on temperature, because LEDs do not create an infrared profile. They don't emit IR. IR heats surfaces but not the ambient air around it. And as the University of Mississippi learned early on in 2009, cannabis thrives in high temperatures. That means the surface, the leaf surface temperature is actually most optimally efficient above 82 and 83 degrees Fahrenheit. So there's a couple of misnomers out there anecdotally that need to be addressed when you're dealing with LED. So without that IR, you want higher lights on temperatures in your room. And you have to make sure because of that, that your root media is a lower temperature. So maybe your effluent temperature from your fertigation machine, you dial that down to 62 degrees if you're used to 68. Things like that. And defoliation, totally key. Tracking to vapor pressure deficit, making sure your VPD is tracked and monitored over a 24-hour cycle, also extremely important. Making sure you attack veg correctly. A healthy LED veg plant with a lot of light intensity grown correctly in veg is strong. It withstands pathogens. It has a root mass that is going to be vastly superior to lower light veg plants produced under legacy lighting technologies. So there's a whole associated portfolio of ways to attack the plant to support it with LED and all the other things you need to do environmentally to make sure you're using that energy correctly. And if you do that and you look at it from a whole systems end-to-end perspective along the whole cultivation value chain, you understand that LED is asking more, delivering more, so you have to support that. The results that we've gotten both from our clients and from our own cultivation facilities, both here in Colorado, we're Boulder based, out into Michigan as well, have been always superior to HBS, but it took us a long time to get there. So if you ever have questions about that, feel free to reach out to anybody on the GrowRay team directly. We're happy to chat. We're not always just looking to sell lights or technologies. As a Boulder County community member, I love to participate in ways that can help growers achieve energy efficiency and not leave yield on the table. So that's about it. Feel free to reach out anytime to myself or Jordan Stouter. We work together in GrowRay. Thank you.
Thank you, Ash. We do have a couple of questions in the chat.
You bet. I'll pull those up.
One of them is from Nick, Neil, two of them from Nick and one of them from Neil.
Yep. So the DLC Hort list, we're going through those processes right now. There's a certification called 8800 that we're doing as we speak, and we're about to be listed on the DLC Hort as we do 8800 as well. It should be about another 3 weeks for us on that one. I'm seeing from Neil that you asked, did you say that you allow the room temperatures to be higher with LED because there's less infrared output from the LEDs compared to HBS? Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So double-ended high-pressure sodium lamps emit anywhere from 12 to 21% of their entire output in the form of infrared. And so what we found early on is a lot of growers who wanted to have like a 76 or 77 degree Fahrenheit room, when they used LEDs, they were underperforming. And we found that when you turn the actual ambient temperature of the room up to account for the lack of infrared, and you had an 83 degree room, as long as you did everything else correct in terms of CO2, lights off temperatures, effluent water temperature being lower, et cetera, we found that that made the difference, because what you're shooting for is the metabolic rate in the cannabis plant where it functions most optimally. And when you have double-ended high-pressure sodium lamps, your room temperature, your ambient temperature does not tell you the whole story about what the temperature is on the surface of your leaves, on the surface and interior of your actual flowers. It's different. It's higher. With IR heating those, you get, a delta of anywhere between 2 and 8 degrees between the 77 degree air temp that you're registering and the actual leaf surface temperature and the metabolic temperature rate at which you're actually conducting growth and photomorphogenesis in the plant. So it's really key point there. That's a great question. How do you practically, this is also from Nick, how do you practically track VPD since you need leaf surface temperature for the calc? So to track vapor pressure deficit, now this is my understanding, you do not need leaf surface temperature necessarily for the calc in an LED room. Leaf surface temperature and ambient air temperature in an LED room are very close, very close. They should be identical since we're not heating the surface arbitrarily with anything but the actual choice of where we're putting the ambient air temperature. Therefore, VPD just becomes a numerical calculation between ambient temperature in the room, and thus the plant being the same, and relative humidity. So that's the benefit of LED, is there's not a delta between LST and ambient temperature. Therefore, you only need the 2 data points to run your VPD, excuse me, and your sensors in your room should be able to pick that up. Okay, I think that's it for the chat questions. If that's
Have
it.
any other questions out there?
Yeah.
Anybody wants to raise their hand? All right.
All right. Thanks all. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ash. Yeah, that was some great information. It's definitely interesting to see, how technology is just always continuing to improve. And it's great to see that, the DLC list is being expanded. So yeah, there's been a lot more products on there. And that's, what we use for our rebates as well. So yeah, to determine the eligibility. So thanks so much, Ash.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And with that, I'll turn it over to Bonnie. Bonnie is within the flow, and she is also a committee member. And I'll just go ahead and, Bonnie, if you just want to give like a brief introduction and then tell us about your experience.
Sure. Can everybody see my first slide here?
Not yet, Bonnie.
Yeah, not yet, Bonnie.
Oh, no. Uh-oh. I may have some internet issues I may need to contend with. Can everybody see my slide here? Marijuana business LED upgrade rebate process?
No, Bonnie,
No.
your video and audio is a little shaky. You might want to turn off your video and then try the
Okay.
share.
Yep, I'm gonna try that. Hang on one sec. Okay, I'm gonna turn off my video. Okay, and now I'll try. It looks like it. Here we go. All right. Can you see that yet?
It's working.
Looks like it's coming up. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, all good.
Great. Okay. So hi, everybody. My name is Bonnie Ballman. I sit on the steering committee. And my chat today is just about my experience navigating the rebate process with Excel, PACE, and Eof Credits. So this is really meant to just illuminate the process for other cultivators who are considering the leap. That was a lot of great info from Ash, and this is the next step that kind of supports the financial jump for LEDs. So, all right, that's basically what I just told you. So step 1 is to reach out to the appropriate local contact at PACE, let them know that you're going to be performing an LED upgrade and confirming that the rebate funds are in fact available. If you're in the city of Boulder, you would contact Denise Grimm. And if you're in the county, you would contact Ambra Sutherland, and their emails are there. Step 2 is to reach out to John Schneider at Excel to inform him of your plans to perform the upgrade. He's going to ask for a complete packet of materials, which are here in the bullet points. I worked with an engineer, Nick Collins. He's actually on the call here, and he helped put all of these materials together for submission to John. And you guys can see here, it's a custom workbook, an application, some information on the LED lights that you're purchasing, Ppfd maps, which sometimes are provided by the lighting manufacturer, or the engineer that's helping you out can help with that. And then the cost proposal for the upgrade. Step 3 is to secure an engineering professional. For us, that was really mandatory. There's engineering calculations that need to be performed as part of the custom rebate. And so I put a couple of emails here. I think Joe is on this call. And Joe, we haven't met yet, but I got your info from John over at Excel. And we went through Nick Collins. So those are just a couple of options if you're looking for an engineer that can help you with this. The next step is part of the Ppfd info that gets submitted along with the other materials. And then once all of the items in the package have been submitted, Excel's engineers will analyze everything and hopefully approve the project. And if approved, you'll receive a letter that gives you the rebate estimate. And at that point, the fixtures can be purchased. I have in red here, if you purchase the fixtures prior to approval, you may lose your eligibility for a rebate. So that's an important point that that you all want to make sure is in line. This is an example of a approval that we received for one of our rooms. And as you can see here, our total project cost is $81,000, $81,650. And then the rebate that we were approved for is $26,467. So that definitely takes the sting out of the financial impact of this upgrade. So I just wanted to let you guys see what that looks like. And then at that point, when you receive this notification, you're clear to purchase the lights and install the lights. And you can also submit that pre-approval letter to your PACE representative because they use that Excel custom rebate figure to determine the other rebates that you may qualify for. And then after they've been installed, you just have to close out the project by submitting the final costs, which include the labor and installation costs and the final verification signatures in the project application. And at that point, Excel sends you a check. And then there's additional rebates that you can qualify for. And Ambra is going to be talking about how the PACE rebates work and how the Eof credit works. And lastly, I just wanted to show this to the growers. This is for one room that we upgraded. Our project cost was $37,000. The Excel rebate, $13,000. The PACE and the Eof credit combined for $3,600. So we were looking at 44% of the project being covered by rebates and credits. And that's it. Does anybody have any questions?
Bonnie, this is Amber. I just had one clarification. When you are in contact, so you're considering a project and you're in contact with Excel, that's also a good time to contact PACE, as we do also require kind of a pre-approval on that. And then we just use the Excel rebate information for our estimator. So just wanted a quick clarification on that.
Yeah. I mean, in the beginning, I think the first step was to reach out to PACE and let you guys know that, what we were considering and make sure the funds are available. And then really, I mean, I worked with, Denise all throughout the process. So, opening that door in the beginning and then, working together through the process is really helpful. Does anybody else have any questions? Doesn't look like it.
Thanks, Bonnie. That was great.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Bonnie. I think it's just so good to get, a real hands-on experience, somebody that's gone through it, and especially Bonnie, for you in the city of Boulder and also in the county. So you've seen the nuances of each one. So thank you for sharing that information.
That real life example is powerful, so I appreciate that as well.
Excellent. So next up, I'm going to turn it over to Joe to discuss, applying for the Excel rebate process. And then we'll turn it back to me to discuss the rebates and managing the credits as well.
All right, thanks. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Yeah,
Yep.
sorry, I'm juggling between my phone and my computer here, so glad it's working out. So yeah, as Amber said, you know, I'm gonna dive into the Excel rebate process a little bit deeper. And you know, Bonnie you know, went over the process and she already touched on some of what I'm gonna go over here, but you know, like I said, I'm gonna dive into the details a little bit more. And so I represent a couple of organizations. One is Cultivate Energy Optimization. We do direct to what I call direct to grower consulting for, you know, rebate and incentive procurement all over the country. We do some energy efficiency design consulting and work with codes and standards and whatnot. And then I also work with Franklin Energy. So and with Franklin, we design and implement rebate and energy efficiency programs specifically for cannabis and indoor ag that utilities offer to growers. We have 5 programs throughout the country, Colorado, that are in Colorado, Illinois, Michigan, and New York. And so far, we've, you know, through these programs, we've saved over 40 million kilowatt hours, which is a ton. So, you know, if you have grows in other states, you know, don't hesitate to reach out. There's a chance that, you know, we're already working with those utilities. Did somebody have a question? Nope. Okay. Yeah, so this is just to give you a little bit of perspective. This is the utility map in Colorado. You know, there's and each one of these utilities has their own rebate program. They have their own rules. They have their own rebate levels, and you know, it can get pretty confusing. But you know, in Boulder, we're kind of in that area that I circled right there generally, you know, luckily Excel is the utility there. You know, Excel has a really good program. I've worked with, like I said, utilities all over the country. And I know there's probably some underlying perceptions of Excel, and you know, a lot of those are for good reason, but you know, their rebate levels are good, their programs are good, and they're, you know, relatively easy. The programs are relatively easy to use as well. Just, you know, you're lucky that you don't have to deal with some of the California utilities, because their process can be a nightmare. So, you know, and on top of that, you know, Excel is one of the most forward-thinking, large investor-owned utilities in the country. You know, they have a great renewable and carbon emission initiatives and whatnot. So I know they get a bad rap, but you know, generally speaking, you know, they have good programs and they're pretty good operation. Okay, so you know, Excel's efficiency and rebate programs can kind of be split into 2 categories, and I'll go over these in a little bit: prescriptive and custom. But you know, as Bonnie said, you know, rebates from Excel are cash rebates. You get a check in the mail, you know, and you can also assign that check to an alternate recipient or third party. So, you know, if you're a grower, this is a great way to buy down the upfront cost to LEDs. So your manufacturer distributor can take the check and then discount you based on what that rebate level is. So, you know, really great tool to take advantage of, and a lot of different utilities across the country do that as well. And so to get rebates from Excel, you know, obviously you have to buy electricity or gas from Excel, and the rebates come from what's called a demand side management cost adjustment charge on each one of your bills. And so I kind of highlighted it there on the right. There's all these different riders or additional costs that you have to pay on top of just kilowatt hours and kilowatts. And so each individual business customer pays into this demand side management fund, and that's generally where most of the rebate dollars come from. So, you know, these rebate dollars are technically, if you're a grower or you're a a paying business customer, it's your money. So take advantage of it where you can. All right. So Excel's got programs for both existing facilities and new construction or major renovation. So an existing facility would be a retrofit or replacement of existing equipment, like if you're swapping out an LED or swapping out an HPS for an LED, right? And then new construction either can be a brand new build, an expansion of your current facility, or what's called a space use change. So if you have an office space that you're turning into a grow room or something like that. And then generally the 2 or 3 types of programs, they have a prescriptive program, and I'll dive into the details a little bit more, but it's a set rebate amount based on the type of equipment and their efficiencies, and pre-approval is not required. And then you have non-prescriptive or custom. The rebates here are not set, so they're going to be based on the energy savings from your project. And as Bonnie said, each project will be analyzed by Excel engineers, and the project has to pass their cost benefit payback test to receive a rebate. And you'll hear this or see this a couple times, but pre-approval is required. So before purchase and install, if you buy anything or install anything before you get pre-approval from Excel, you're going to be out of luck. And then they have what Excel calls study and audit-based incentives. These 2 are for new construction. So they have an energy design assistance program. That's for very large buildings, where they do a whole building model and provide recommendations and whatnot. And then they also have energy efficient buildings, which is also new construction, but for smaller facilities. And so, most grows in Boulder County would probably fall into that range. But they take rebates from their prescriptive programs and take their custom rates and apply that to your design, and also provide some recommendations on energy and cost savings. And I actually know a number of growers who've worked through the EEB program, and it's a little bit longer of a process, but I think it's definitely worth it if you're building a new facility. Okay, so prescriptive rebate programs. Like I said, it's a predetermined rebate amount, and pre-approval is not required. Again, it's a set amount, so it's what I would call kind of menu driven, and I have a picture of it here on the next slide, I believe. And so if your equipment fits into one of their categories, you get a specific dollar amount. And Excel, bases these rebate levels on typical commercial industrial equipment. So things like LEDs for offices and human comfort cooling and things like that. And most of their programs, they're going to have a cap at 60% of the project cost. So you can't receive a rebate that's larger than 60% of the total project cost. So that's material, labor, and anything else any other costs that would be related to the project, engineering costs, things like that. Generally, equipment used for plant growth doesn't fall into one of Excel's prescriptive rebate categories. You will find some equipment does. For instance, if you have a VFD on a motor or something like that, that would qualify. But horticultural lighting and process cooling for plant production rooms are going to be custom. But the application process is simple. You buy your equipment, you fill out the rebate application, provide your specs, your invoices, and a signed application, and then you get your check. They have some new programs coming out that may where HVAC and grows could fit into. It hasn't been approved yet, but they have a new HVAC program. And then they have their regular commercial lighting program, compressed air. Those are kind of just some examples. But your LEDs in your hallways, your bathrooms, your offices, things like that, that'll fall into your the regular prescriptive lighting program. And then, lighting for your grow room is going to be custom. So here's just an example of the prescriptive application, right? Pretty simple. They identify the fixture type, what's your wattage, what are you replacing? Hey, there's your rebate. Pretty simple. There's a lot of information, or pretty much all the information you'll need to be able to decide, hey, does this piece of equipment fall into this rebate? And just generally for indoor lighting, they do require DLC for most types of fixtures. For horticulture lighting, Excel does not require DLC, and I know there's a little bit of a difference between Boulder County PACE rebates and Excel there. So if you want to layer on Boulder County, your fixture is going to have to be DLC. Okay, and then custom rebates. So this is for equipment and projects outside of the prescriptive requirements and not covered in their prescriptive program. So what I generally like to tell growers or people is that, if you're installing equipment and it's saving energy, there's most likely a rebate for it. And that's because Excel will run calculations on each individual project and figure out, hey, what are the energy savings here? Is it beneficial for both, us and the customer? And, does the payback, look like it's going to be a worthy investment or equipment that's going to be around for a while? And so, it doesn't matter what the type of equipment is. They'll look at it and they'll consider it. Again, pre-approval. I'm going to try and drill this into everybody's heads, but it is required. I know sometimes it doesn't work out for growers' timelines. But there's significant dollars on the table, so most of the time it makes sense to wait. I know Bonnie had said somewhere around 40% of her project was paid for, which is pretty awesome. So the rebate amounts for custom are going to vary project by project, but typically, in what Excel says is, the rebate rate is going to be up to $500 per kilowatt saved. There are a number of nuances where it's not always going to be $500 or $400, depending upon the type of time of day that the equipment runs and whatnot. But generally, you can count on somewhere around $400 per kilowatt saved. And then again, any lighting, horticulture lighting, doesn't need to be DLC through the custom program. Custom program covers many different things like insulation, roofing, windows, any standard commercial lighting that's not a one-to-one retrofit, and then new and emerging technologies as well. So if you're building a new room and you're putting spray foam insulation up, there's a rebate for that, right? You just got to go through the process of applying and whatnot, and you can combine multiple measures, right? If you're doing lighting, insulation, and HVAC, you can submit all of those at once to Excel and only have to go through the process once. And then again, equipment for plant production or plant growth is more than likely going to be through the custom rebate program. And Bonnie kind of went over this, but there's a number of documents that are required, right? You need your application, the custom workbook, which is an Excel file, needs to be filled out. You need to submit your equipment specs, material and install costs, and there's also some additional data on facility characteristics, operating hours, and things like that. And then depending upon the type of equipment, Excel is going to want to see, your layouts, your MEPs, and for lighting, definitely your Ppfd maps. That is a requirement. Trying to think here. I don't want to bore you guys because Bonnie went over all this. So trying to pick out some things that she didn't touch on. Once all your paperwork is in, typically takes up 10 to 14 business days to get your approval back. So not a ton of time. And then once you are approved and have received your pre-approval letter, you have 2 years or 24 months to implement the project from the date on your pre-approval letter. And then something really important to note is that you submit all of your documents for pre-approval, you get your letter, and then your scope changes. Well, what do you do? Well, if costs change by more than 10% during construction or after you've completed things from pre-approval, the project will need to be reanalyzed by Excel's engineering team. So rebate levels or even your qualification could change, and so it's kind of a delicate balance there. I would suggest just making sure that before you're submitting for pre-approval, you're sure you're going to move forward with the scope you're looking at. If you just want an idea of what the rebate would be for some multiple options, I can definitely help you out with that, or John Schneider at Excel, or kind of any of your rebate pros that you know of. Here's just an example of the Indoor Ag custom Excel file workbook. Pretty simple stuff. Just submitting your operating hours and what the room is, and what the scope is here, what you have in, what you're replacing, and then also your Ppfd levels as well. And so Ppfd maps are a really important part of the process. Excel wants to make sure that the system, the baseline system that they're comparing a LED system to, is a comparable layout or project. So existing or baseline, and that would be for new construction, your average Ppfd has to equal the Ppfd of the efficient option. If it doesn't, there are a couple different pathways you can take. So for instance, if you have 10 high pressure sodiums in a flower room and you're going to 20 LEDs and you really want to increase your light levels, what you'll have to do is add additional fixtures to your baseline that are what I call an assumed baseline, to bring your baseline Ppfd levels up to what the efficient option is providing. So, and I just want to be clear, you don't actually have to install those fixtures. You just have to submit them in the workbook as a line item, just so Excel can account for them during their analysis. Let me think about anything I missed here on Ppfd maps. If you're a grower, your lighting manufacturer, distributor should be providing Ppfd maps for you. And honestly, you should always be asking for them if you're procuring a rebate or not. And just remember, these are also modeled light levels. I would suggest you do your own measurements, either when you're sampling the fixtures or after you've installed them. So, as lighting's one of the most important limiting factors in plant growth. So, so you don't just, I wouldn't just hang your fixtures like you normally would in a one-to-one replacement. You want to measure and modify and really find what works best for you and your plants. So if you're a grower and you don't have a meter, I would suggest you buy one today, or ask somebody who does, who has one, who can come verify your light levels when you're sampling any LEDs or after you've installed them. If you want suggestions on what to buy, don't hesitate to reach out. There's a lot of great products out there that measure not only Ppfd but also your spectrum as well, and they offer them in handheld devices and whatnot. So generally yep.
Sorry, in the essence of time, do you mind wrapping it up?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I'm actually pretty much
Sorry.
done. Yeah, thanks for the time check. No, I was worried about that. Cool. So yeah, just a kind of visual here of what would be custom or prescriptive, right? Your Hort lighting, dehumidification, your HVAC, or even your controls, right? That's all going to be custom. Your prescriptive measures and grows are going to be, your irrigation system, right? Those are pumps and anything in, non-plant production areas as well. Yep. So that's it. Happy to answer any questions. Sorry for going over time there.
Thank you, Joe. Offhand, I'm not seeing any in the chat. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Thanks again, Joe. Yeah, that was very thorough. It's great to see all of the rebates that are available out there right now through Excel. So I'll go ahead and share my screen here, and then we'll just do a quick overview of the PACE rebates and the EIOF credits.
You had it for a second, Amber.
Yeah, it's like I'm trying to minimize it so I can also see you guys, so bear with me.
Good.
It's like now my share mode doesn't want to, okay, here we go. Was that coming up any better?
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay. So I might just leave it like this. So discussing just some of the City of Boulder and the Boulder County rebates and credits. I think Bonnie and Joe went over a lot of this, but just to reiterate, so most of eligible equipment, the most common that we see are T5 fluorescents, T8s, metal halides, ceramic metal halide, and high pressure sodium. And so as we mentioned, before purchase and installation of product, contact PACE and Excel. And you basically submit your quote, your Excel rebate amount, product specification sheet, and must be DLC or Energy Star listed to qualify. And then PACE sends the rest estimated rebate amount and EIOF credit estimate back to you to let you know what that potential would be. And then we would schedule an on-site walkthrough with you to verify old equipment. The rebate reservation that we put in to reserve the funds is good for 60 days. If you need an extension, just make sure to email us in advance in case, in case something's back ordered or you just need a little more time to install those. And then you complete the project and send the final invoice to PACE and schedule the final site visit with PACE. And then with that, we send you a rebate check. Our rebate checks can only go to the owner of the business or the person submitting it for the business and not the contractor. So a little bit different from Excel. And then in addition, we also have rebates for HVAC and solar through the PACE as well. So just to let you guys know that. And then just a little bit on the EIOF credits for City of Boulder and Boulder County. So you work with PACE on rebates and the EIOF credit estimate, and then PACE will send you the EIOF credit form to review and sign. And then the EIOF credit will be applied to a future bill or past bill, depending on if it's City of Boulder or Boulder County. And then we do require proper disposal of old bulbs and fixtures. And I can give you some resources on that on the next slide. But basically just a couple of differences. So between the City of Boulder, and so Denise Grimm is managing the City of Boulder. So if we get anything in, we'll send her over to contact you. So basically you complete the EIOF cover sheet and the EIOF credit form. And if you have any questions about this, make sure to contact Elizabeth Vasatka, who is also on the call today. And then the credit will be applied to an appropriate invoice, and then it is limited to 1 credit per year. Just 1 second, I had this thing. And then Boulder County requirements. So you complete the EIOF credit form with signatures, and then the credit will be applied to a future quarterly invoicing. It's just the invoicing is a little bit different between the city and the county. So that's the differences there. And then, as I mentioned, I have developed a contractor list for lighting Ppfd maps and energy audits that I can send out after this presentation. I believe Nick and also Joe are listed on that as well. And then just to reiterate, like bulb recycling, so that includes fluorescents, metal halides, high pressure sodium lights. So dispose of these safely through Boulder County Hazardous Waste Facility or a similar hazardous facility, materials facility. And then fixture recycling. We just found out that EcoCycle and Resource can take these and call in advance if you have a large quantity. They just like to know that those are coming. So with that. And then lastly, just wanted to give you a quick overview of a project we're working on through Boulder County. So it's the DLI Daily Light Integral Project. So the steering committee is working with a couple of Boulder County greenhouses to install DLI sensors. And this data will help to improve the model's ability to account for losses of sunlight energy for the greenhouses due to shading and the glazing effect on the windows. The goal is to improve the model's accuracy and people's confidence in the model. This will help predict energy savings from the DLI for future projects. And then we will also be looking to develop a fact sheet or case study around this project. So really it's, to currently help a couple of our greenhouse cultivators, and then also just with the information, getting that out into the greater community. And I will open it up to Neil or Nick to see if they have any additional things to add on that.
I think that does a pretty good job, but if there's any questions, Nick could probably answer.
Okay,
Yep.
great.
Same here. I think you covered it well, Ambra, but again, if there's questions, happy to take those.
Excellent. Yeah, so just if you need to reach out to us, here's my contact information, asutherland@bouldercounty.org, and then Denise is dlgrim@bouldercounty.org. So feel free to, reach out to us. We can answer your questions and get you started on a lighting upgrade project. And with this, I'm going to turn it over, see if there's any last minute questions. I'm going to stop sharing, see if there's any questions in the chat, and then quickly look here.
Thanks for that, though, Amber. A lot of good information, so appreciate it.
Great. And yeah, certainly, if you have any questions, please reach out. It doesn't look like there's any questions. So with this, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Pat Shanks, who is also on the steering committee, and he's going to cover composting and the survey. Thanks, Pat.
Okay, thank you, Ambra. Everybody hear me okay? Anyway,
Yep. Sound good.
Pardon?
No, you sound good. You sound good, Pat.
Good.
There you go.
Okay, so I'm on the EIOF steering committee and have been for a few years, and I have a specific interest in climate change, waste, and especially keeping organic waste out of the landfills because of methane generation and so forth. So I've focused a little bit on that on the steering committee. And one of the things we did as a steering committee was a survey of cultivators in City of Boulder and County of Boulder. And we got a bunch of good response. About half of the county growers and maybe a quarter of the city growers responded. And I just want to quickly go over that before I hand it off to Caitlin Urso, who will talk about new med rules for organic waste disposal. But anyway, we asked what cultivators are currently doing in terms of organic waste disposal, and about 70% said it's going to the landfill, and 30% are using a compost hauler, somebody who picks up and hauls their material to a compost facility. Then we asked, would you participate in composting? if it was practical, and 100% said yes to that. So it's encouraging. And then we asked various questions.
Hey, sorry to interrupt you, Pat, but Amber, I think you're still sharing, and Alex, I think you're unmuted, and we can hear you there. So
Thanks, Jordan.
yeah, doing
Is
some
that better?
housekeeping. Yeah, that's
Okay, sorry about that, guys.
No, you're good. Sorry, Pat.
Okay, thanks, Jordan. So just a few other things. We asked specific questions about what's being used for soil, and most said they use cocoa for that, and also some add perlite and rock wool and some other additives. And so that has an impact on composting the soil. But most, 100% dispose of the soil after each growing cycle. So that's a significant part of it. And then the green waste, the fan leaves and stems and sticks, 85% of that is currently going to landfill, 15% composted. And we asked for preferences in dealing with this issue, and 58% said they'd prefer a green waste hauler to help them with this. 28% said they'd like to do on-site composting. And one grow suggested they'd like biomass gasification. And then finally we asked about the barriers, and 85% said the biggest barrier is cost. 70% said lack of space for dealing with this waste issue themselves. Those interested in compost said that training and knowledge of how to do that are one of the barriers. And 100% of those in the city said that the city rules, which require indoor maceration of organic waste, are a problem. So that was basically the outcome of our survey. And one really fortunate thing is that the MED rules governing how waste can be disposed have recently been changed. And so I'd like to turn this over to Caitlin Urso from CDPHE now, and she's worked with the MED on the new rules. And there's still some confusion from cultivators about what the new rules actually mean. So Caitlin can explain this, and there'll be a chance to ask questions and so forth. Okay, thank you. Caitlin?
All right. Let me get my screen share in presentation mode here. All right. I think I can see you guys both now. Might have to address the chat at the end just for the sake of window space. But anyways, I'm happy to talk to you guys today. I'm going to go really quickly through the new organic marijuana waste rules to save time, but I'm here for questions. I work for the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, so a state level agency for public health and the environment. My role is to be a free environmental consultant for all small businesses in Colorado. 100 employees or less is kind of our threshold. I rotate through industries that I focus on. Most recently, I've been focusing on the marijuana and hemp industries here in Colorado. Been focused on that since 2018. Prior to that, I did about 2 years on craft brewing. I'm a free sustainability coach, both compliance and going above and beyond actions. So where we previously stood prior to January 1st of this year in Colorado with marijuana plant waste is essentially that all marijuana waste had to be rendered unusable and unrecognizable before leaving a licensed premise, which resulted in at least 50% non-marijuana waste being mixed with the waste stream. This is also consistent with a lot of other state regulations. Colorado was the first to do this, but a lot of legalized states followed suit. for our model. This model had unintended impacts. It essentially doubled the waste foot and it sent it all to landfill because it's really hard to find 50% organic waste to mix with your plant waste when your plant waste is your largest production waste. And so this led to often importing new materials to be composted, if at all. And it was really a barrier to composting, especially because composting is typically charged per mass versus per pound of pickup, so per volume versus just picking up one dumpster. So effective January 1st of this year, Colorado, through the Marijuana Enforcement Division, changed these regulations for organic waste handling. Essentially, the low THC components of the plant, the stalks, the stems, the root balls, and the grow media can be composted either on-site or off-site without that mixing. So you no longer have to mix 50-50. This rule also allows for anaerobic digestion, biochar, and gasification. So essentially, if you're going to dispose of your organic waste, your low THC organic waste, you don't have to mix 50-50. The action of composting itself meets the unusable and unrecognizable requirement. The final compost product of marijuana isn't going to be distinguishable from any other type of compost. The only
Quickly, it's not cycling through your slides.
Oh.
We're still stuck on the first one.
Oh, it is on my screen.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. Let me go back. Can you see?
It looks like it's working now.
Okay. So.
Yeah, I can see the second slide.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are we on slide 5 now?
Yeah.
With the new marijuana. Okay. We'll just do this. Sorry, it's not zoomed in. I don't know why the presentation mode wasn't working with Teams, but that's okay. Thank you. So by the action of composting, you're meeting that unusable and unrecognizable requirement. The biggest caveat here for the marijuana license holders is that you're required to have a waste management plan, basically just a written plan for how you're formally going to manage this waste stream. Off-site composting requires a written contract between the marijuana license holder and the composter, or if there's a third-party hauler involved, they also need to have a contract in place. So clarifying this a little bit further, post-extracted plant waste is only exempt from the 50-50 mixing rule if composted on-site at a licensed facility. So if it's going off-site by a third party, it must be mixed and rendered first. And then I mentioned if a third-party waste hauler is used to transport the marijuana waste to the composter, both the hauler and the composter have to have written contracts with the marijuana license holder. So really the intent of this rule was to make composting much more accessible for cultivators, especially for those low THC component waste streams, the stalks, the stems, the fan leaves, the root balls. So things that would not be exempt that still need to be mixed 50-50 before going to compost might be like unusable marijuana buds, the sugar leaves, anything like that. But stalks, stems, fan leaves, and root balls can go straight to composting under these new rules. So what does this mean? Cultivators should start side streaming the stalks, the stems, the fan leaves, and the root balls for compost pickups, because you no longer have to mix those 50-50 before sending them out the door and render unusable and recognizable. So if you sort them at your facility out of your typical waste stream, you can go direct to compost. Remember that waste haulers need contracts with cultivators to accept that waste. And then make sure you're working with compost facilities to understand what materials can and cannot be composted. I'm excited that we'll hear from A1 Organics next, and I'm sure they'll touch on this, because a good example of this is, some facilities aren't able to accept rock wool based on their capacity or just their mixing ratios. Same with other types of grow media. So if you want to dive deeper into these, I have provided Ambra the PDF of these slides, and I'm sure she'll share them with the group. But here's a link to the red line rules themselves effective January 1st. So if you actually want to read the regulations pertaining to this, they start on page 96. There's only about 2 pages of organic waste changes. And then there's also a link to an MED, the Marijuana Enforcement Division presentation on these specific new rules. And then I just want to point out, if you guys don't have access to this already, that the Denver County Sustainability Work Group has guidance on best management practices holistically for sustainable cannabis industry. Same thing with the National Cannabis Industry Association. They have some really great reports that I just wanted to make sure you guys have the links to. So with that, are there any new questions on these organic waste handling changes? One thing that I didn't mention before I take questions too is that through the same rulemaking, Colorado also legalized reusable packaging for marijuana as well. So consumers can take their packaging back to the marijuana store. The store has the option to either bulk recycle or reuse. Reuse just requires a sanitization and inspection step for good working order.
Okay, thank you, Caitlin. Are there any questions for Caitlin? Okay, well, we're a little behind schedule, so next we are going to hear from A1 Organics, and we have Tanner Phelps and Clinton Sander on the call. And if you could just try to be as efficient as possible with time, that would be great. So welcome to both of you.
Great, thank you guys. Thanks everybody. Can everybody hear me? I'm actually having some technical difficulties. I'm on a telephone and computer.
Yeah,
good?
Yes.
Yep. Good. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I'm gonna just my name is Clinton Sander. I'm the marketing manager for A1 Organics, and Tanner Phelps is on the line as well. He's our technical manager and kind of our direct lead on cannabis recycling and composting. So for any technical information, we're recommending you reach out to him directly, and then other information can come to me. Next slide. So briefly, I just want to talk about A1 Organics real fast. I'll make this efficient, but yeah, we are the largest organics recycler here in the state of Colorado, and many more states. We're pretty big. But yeah, just to let you guys know, I mean, we're processing 425,000 tons of green waste materials a year. We've been around about 48 years, and we're really excited that the state has allowed for this industry to make it easier to divert these organic materials, because truly they are natural resources and we need to use them and put them back in the ground. I'm going to let Tanner take over now and kind of talk through the technical side of what we're seeing, and kind of point out some of the concerns we have. Not concerns, but we just want to make sure you guys are aware of contamination factors, what we see in normal organics recycling industry. So go ahead, Tanner.
All right, yeah, so like Clinton said, just kind of going over some of the things we've talked about before. So just like Caitlin was saying, there's the 4 materials that can be sent to us for composting just as is with no mixing anymore. That'll be the stalks, stems, fan leaves, and roots. Same, just like Caitlin said for that. The registered marijuana waste, now that has to be mixed 50-50 to us. So the green waste, we just receive and process that as green waste, just like Caitlin said, but to confirm it from a composter, yes, this does make great compost. It breaks down just fine. We do process a lot of other green waste, so this just goes in our green waste stream. But then what you can mix with this material, so you can see in these pictures, wood is trying to talk quickly here, pretty much wood is what we're looking for. You can get this from landscapers, just mulch material. That way, that just makes it easier for us to compost. We receive so much material, like we said, we can't go through and pick out individual pieces of litter one by one. That's not really feasible for the size of our operation. So we're trying to keep the stream clean, and by doing that, best way is mixing this with wood. Some of those other materials that are listed in the new rules and regulations that can be mixed with it, we are trying to stay away from that, like food waste. That kind of puts us into different compost regulatory channels. Don't really want to get into all that right now, but basically, long story short, mixing it with green waste and other wood materials is what we're looking for. Boxes and paper waste we are not really looking for because that can have the contamination that we're avoiding. So any plastic, stickers, tape, staples that are in boxes, that can be a contamination factor for us. So yeah, talking about the contamination, that's another thing is that when any green waste material is sent to us, any contamination has to be removed beforehand before you load it up into any hauling vehicles to be sent to our facility. So we have pictures here of tags that are on the individual plants. Now I know that's a requirement and there's nothing that we can change about that. However, those tags need to be removed before it's sent to be composted because plastic doesn't compost. That becomes a contamination for us. Another thing is the soils. So with that, like people were saying earlier in this presentation, some of the main grow medias that are used are the cocoa coir, the perlite, and rock wool. At A1, we don't accept rock wool for composting. That is too high of a risk of contamination for us, especially the fiberglass contamination and any plastics. Fiberglass doesn't break down in composting, and that's really bad for us. So we don't accept rock wool or perlite, but the cocoa coir should be accepted. Just reach out to me kind of on a case-by-case basis with that. It should be accepted. We just need to make sure that the process for the specific facility doesn't involve mixing that with any type of waste materials. And yeah, then just talking about the importance of composting, the CTCL, that's closing the compost loop. It's something that's talked about a lot in composting. So long story short, going really quick here, plants, especially marijuana, pulls up a lot of nutrients from the soil. And so that can kind of deplete the soil nutrients. However, all of those are in the plant itself. Nutrient recycling is then the idea of reusing those plants and all the nutrients to make compost, and that puts the nutrients back into the soil, into the ground to be used by the next round of plants. That way, you know, if you send all this plant material to the landfill, then the plants are pulling nutrients out of the soil, plants are going to the landfill, and the nutrients are just being disposed of. And we're trying to, you know, eliminate that and be more green in our process here. Also, composting reduces greenhouse gases because landfills produce a lot of greenhouse gases, namely methane, from the breakdown of organic materials. Another last thing with compost is the reduced water usage, and that's just saying that using compost can absorb a lot of water and then can reduce the amount of water needed to grow your plants. And just like Caitlin was saying, we'll need the contracts because we are what would be considered a third-party composter because we aren't the facility who's growing the marijuana. So we would need a contract with the hauler and with the regulated marijuana business. So if you're a business that wants to send us any cannabis waste, then you need to reach out so we can get a really quick, simple contract in place. And same if you're a hauler that will be bringing us any cannabis waste. These contracts, they're very simple. They're mostly just to meet the requirements of regulations. It just says that you are bringing us this cannabis material and the material that is brought to us is going to be already rendered so that it meets all of the MED requirements. So we aren't a rendering facility, we're a composting facility. So you can't bring us material, the regulated marijuana material, say buds. You can't just bring us to them as is. It has to be mixed before it arrives to our facility. And so that's just what the contract says. It's very simple. Scott Pexton's contact information is there. He is the person at A1 to reach out to for if you want to send us any material. He is the one who will get you set up with those contracts. He's our tipping manager. Tipping and composting just means sending us materials to be composted. And so, yeah, you can email me with any questions of materials, you know, say, oh, I'm doing this in my process. Can I send you these materials? So reach out to me for that. But in general, like I said, those 4 loosely regulated materials, the stalks, stems, fan leaves, and roots, those can be sent to us without mixing. We still need a contract for those. And the regulated materials need to be sent to us 50-50 mixed. My contact information is right there. So is Clinton's if you want to reach out to us. That's about it. I'm trying to go really fast. But go ahead, please ask any questions if there are any.
Just real quick, Tanner, before I just wanted to throw in, guys, there's a URL address right there, A1 Organics Cannabis Recycling. That is a great link for gathering the same information we just talked about. Also, I just wanted to reiterate, we have 4 locations across the Colorado Front Range. This can be accessed on our website as well, but Commerce City, Sheridan, Eaton, and then our commercial facility is Keensburg, Colorado. The Keensburg, Colorado site would be specifically for haulers, commercial haulers to bring to, just due to the size and capacity of what that site's like. But all 4 sites are available for bringing these materials to. So that's very helpful for you guys. And again, yes, if you're going to hire a hauler, then we can all 3 work together to make sure all contracts are correctly in place. But we're here. We're 100% here to help, guys. Please reach out. Any questions? We're happy to help.
Yeah, we're obviously all about being green, nutrient recycling, composting, keeping things out of landfills. So please, we're here to help. So reach out with questions.
Thank you guys very much. And one other speaker, and that's Alex Baca, who is a hauler who works with some of the cultivators in Boulder and Boulder County. And I'll turn it over to him now, and he can tell us about himself.
All right. Excuse me. Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. First, I want to thank the Boulder County Energy Impact Offset Steering Committee for giving me this opportunity. And my name is Alex Baca, and I know and operate Green Waste Specialist. I've been in business since June of 16, and I have been dealing with A1 Organics since day one. So I do all of my stuff is 100% recyclable. Basically, I go to the facility and under camera, I make sure I'm under camera, following the MED rules. I weigh all your material, charge by weight. I render it unusable and unrecognizable by running it through a tree trimming machine, a wood chipper machine, excuse me, and add the organics. And at that point, I take it off to A1 Organics, and that's kind of my process in a nutshell. I have a certificate of designation with the A1 Organics. And like I say, I follow rule 3-230, basically the waste disposal. What is it? D, where it states waste must be made unusable and unrecognizable. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell. Any questions or any comments or anything?
Yeah, let me ask Alex, I assume you've worked with growers in the city of Boulder, and they have this requirement for indoor maceration. Have you figured out a way to deal with that?
Well, a couple of years ago, I was kind of trying to deal with that, and I found an electric chipper, marijuana chipper, but it was 25 grand and it was not mobile, so it didn't really help me any.
Yeah.
So I exhausted my resources and I just couldn't do much because of the regulations.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, are there any questions or discussions from anybody?
I just have a quick question. This is Bonnie, and this may also incorporate Caitlin if possible. But basically, we work with Alex. It's been really great. Only with our county facility, of course, because we're kind of, our hands are tied with the city regulations requiring maceration before it leaves the building. So we work with him on our county grow. And I just wanted to clarify, we've been talking a lot about mixing, the mixing 50-50 requirement, but not a lot about maceration. And to me, they're 2 different things. So I just wanted to clarify with Caitlin, when you do talk about the requirement for mixing 50-50 has gone away for green waste, are you also, can you basically say that the mixing 50-50 term is interchangeable with maceration? Or are you is that basically, the same thing, or is there a differentiation there? Because, with Alex, for instance, we are still macerating just to kind of cover all the bases.
So,
Bonnie, I don't see Caitlin on the chat.
Oh, okay.
I think she might have left the meeting, so we may have to follow up with her in an email.
Okay, gotcha.
yeah, she sent a chat message that she had to leave, but my understanding is that the green waste and root balls don't have to be macerated, but I've asked Caitlin about this before, and I can double check with that, and we can send an email or something related to that. But that's my understanding. And then, of course, I think when you come to mixing, I appreciate the A1 comments of using wood and mulch and stuff like that, so that even after mixing, you have a chance for composting. But I think they're probably the extracted, buds and things like that probably have to be unrecognizable.
Pat, there was a question in the chat for Alex.
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
It says, how much room do you need on site to do your thing? A couple of parking spots worth of space?
Yeah,
Nick Collins.
Yes, I have a 3/4 ton pickup truck with a diamond plate welded box in the back of it, and I pull my tree trimmer machine. So maybe, two parking lot lengths, maybe 16 feet, 20 feet max,
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, well, I think that wraps this up, and there's.
Thank you all for participating today. Really appreciate your time and all of the information. It's just so great to get updates on everything. Certainly, if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me or Pat, Elizabeth, Bonnie, if you have any follow-up questions that you need answered. Thanks for your time today.
Great job.
Enjoy the sunshine out there too.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.